The Berkeley Reforestation Trust promotes the planting of trees as an essential part of rural development in some of the poorer corners of the world. Through the planting of trees, the Trust not only helps communities whose livelihoods depend on their local forest resources, but also helps us all offset the carbon dioxide emissions we are all responsible for. In India, the Trust is funding a project in Kumaon in the Himalayan foothills, once one of the world's great forested regions, of global as well as of local importance. But today, deforestation is causing critical problems for people and for the environment. The forest-clad foothills of the Himalayas soak up the monsoon rains that break against them. Here, people and forests have generally lived in harmony, natural regeneration balancing the cropping of trees. Villagers farm terraces carved in the hillsides. Fuel for cooking comes from the forest. Animals browse leaves and saplings. Foliage is also cut for fodder, but as the population has increased, the demands on the forest have become too great. The resulting deforestation of the Himalayas is an environmental disaster. Without trees, unstable slopes and terraces give way. Villages may now be several hours' walk from the nearest source of fuel wood and fodder. Denuded hillsides slide into the rivers as rainwater runs off quickly, carrying silt and floodwater to the plains. The Berkeley Reforestation Trust is working to reverse this catastrophe and restore the forests to the benefit of people and the environment. We are in partnership with a local development organisation, Shirag, in Kumaon, bordering Nepal. From this small office, field workers, with our funding, help farmers learn how to restore and manage their forests, and thus sustain their traditional way of life, which is so well suited to the hills. Raju, team leader of our project, is a local man. Ganga works primarily with the village women. Rajesh Tadani has a doctorate in forestry from Yale. He's in overall charge of operations. The team spends much of its time up in the hills. The Trust has been funding reforestation here for several years. This forest regrowth is exciting proof that the tree cover can be restored. Village people in this once degraded area approached our partners for help. If we are to fund a project, the primary motivation must come from the people themselves.
Many generations of forest managers from the British in the pre-independent days and the Indian government in the 50s and 60s realized was that you couldn't have outside managers protecting forests. If you wanted to maintain the forest, if you wanted to protect the forest, the only way to do so was to mobilize the local people to protect the forest for themselves.
This forest is communally owned. Villagers have a stake in it. They now actively manage it, encouraging regrowth, planting trees, and funding a forest guard. This is an oak tree planted only 6 months ago. I trimmed the shoots at the base to encourage the growth.
Balam is a second-generation forest guard. He lives adjacent to this forest and therefore has a personal stake in maintaining and keeping this forest in good shape.
In another 6 months, if we keep the cattle out, the tree will be 3 foot tall or more. And in a few years, this tree can be big enough to start supplying leaves for fodder.
We rely, rather than on barbed wire or stone fencing, on a system known as social fencing. What that does is prevent the villagers from coming into plantations, from coming into protected areas by relying on social pressures. Any villager who is found within the plantation plot is ostracized and shunned by the local villagers. So these are not brick and stone and mortar fencings, they are fencings that depend on social pressure.
The cry of "this forest is guarded, keep your cattle away" echoes across the valleys. This is not a threat, but a reassurance. In the valleys below are numerous tiny backyard nurseries where thousands of saplings are grown each year. The villagers tend these themselves. There's no central project nursery. The villagers, having grown these trees, won't want to see them eaten by a neighbour's cows. The saplings grow here throughout the year. As soon as they are big enough, we plant them out and sow some more. The Trust funds trainers who teach villagers how to establish these nurseries. Almost all these seedlings are indigenous species. These slopes were once covered in forest that was destroyed through cutting and overgrazing. They are now being replanted with saplings from the village nurseries. Six months later, the hillside is covered with saplings, but they're almost invisible beneath faster growing shrubs. Lantana, a garden plant from South America, is a real problem here. Unless it's cleared, the young trees will suffocate.
This is only just, I think, 6-month-old sapling here. Twice a year we chop this lantana to maintain this sapling, otherwise they can't grow. These women, mostly the women, they do the lantana cutting, and they are paid 50 rupees a day. And 2 rupees out of this 50 rupees they collect for the future maintenance.
50 rupees a day is about 70 pence. It's really not practical to expect women who have so little to work for nothing. But fundamental to our participation is the understanding that people work towards the day when our help will no longer be necessary.
So this is our 9-year-old plantation there, and now we are planning to do the same thing here also with the help of community. This area was just like here also before, where you can see now dense forest.
It's exciting to see how quickly a hillside can be restored. Villagers can soon harvest its natural products sustainably.
What we do is increase the productivity of the land by preventing free grazing of cattle, by enclosing parts of the forest and encouraging people to harvest the grass only once or twice a year. What we can achieve is a considerably higher productivity. What Chirag has also achieved in some of the forests where we have been working is a 10 to 12-fold increase in fodder production as a result of exclusion of cattle, as a result of stall feeding.
Villagers can even sell fodder to other villages, ones that might have been dismissive of this project when it started. Some are now asking for our help in setting up similar reforestation projects for themselves. Stall feeding means cattle are kept out of the forest. That stops cattle browsing off the saplings and means that fodder can then be harvested sustainably. Grass is stored to feed to cattle in the winter. And it's not only fodder that is gathered from the forest. This forestry program is helping us. We collect the dried leaves from under the trees and mix them with manure to produce fertilizer. I would encourage other villagers to do the same as us. Everyone can see that there are many trees here now. While a carefully managed forest can also be harvested sustainably for fuel wood, anything that helps reduce the demand on trees has to be for the good. We are promoting an alternative to firewood by making gas from the dung of stall-fed cattle.
Chirag has initially focused on a forestry program, but if we wanted people to protect trees, if we wanted them to plant trees, we also needed to give them alternatives to fuel wood. Biogas is a process by which cattle dung is converted into methane gas. The manure is collected from the cattle. About 20 to 25 kilos of manure are needed for a 1 cubic meter biogas plant.
The dung from just 2 cows produces enough gas for all the cooking needs of a family.
This manure, the cattle dung, is converted into slurry by mixing it into water. And the slurry is fed into the biogas chamber, where by a process of fermentation, the dung is converted to methane gas, and the byproduct is then a very good fertilizer. In fact, the fertilizer produced is better than regular cattle dung because a lot of the pathogens which might otherwise be present in the dung are killed in this fermentation process.
It's not too dirty, and anyway I can wash my hands. It works. We're really pleased with it. And we no longer have to spend hours every day searching for firewood. Villagers who are unable to contribute more than their labour can be helped with meeting some of the cost of a biogas plant, about £130.
For many families, this is not a huge cost, and they adopted this program very quickly. For other families, this is a fairly substantial investment, and they've had to save for some time before they can install a biogas plant in their house. In this area, which was very degraded, women would sometimes spend 2 or 3 hours just going out to gather fuel wood. Now, not only was this a huge use of their time, but when they came back, they'd be physically exhausted and wouldn't really feel like playing with their kids or just spending time with their families. What the afforestation program, coupled with the biogas program, has done is given women a lot more time with which they can relax, attend women's meetings. So it's also been very important in raising the level of awareness of women, because the women now have the time to attend these women's meetings that we organize, which previously they didn't.
Village meetings encourage communal decision-making and reinforce the new awareness that forests can be restored through villagers' own efforts. These women not only have the time to attend meetings now that they are surrounded by sustainable forest, but they can also spend more time in the vegetable garden or with their children. And there is noticeably little coughing here. Biogas means no smoke-filled houses that cause chest disease and eye irritations. The projects we fund must have the goal of self-sufficiency. We promote environmental education in schools. The future of the forests will be in the hands of children like these. The children learn songs about trees and the creatures that live in them. We fund the salary of a teacher, the environmental lady.
to make people conserve the environment, to get them to protect trees, we need to make them more aware, more educated citizens. What we try and do through these classes, catch them while they are young as such, and get them to understand the significance of the trees, of their environment, of their surroundings. And we get them to plant trees in the vicinity of their school, and the hope is that when they grow up, they will become better guardians of their environment.
It's encouraging to see the enthusiasm with which children here take to nurturing trees. By working with villagers to help them build a healthy and sustainable future, this pioneering project shows that it really is possible to reverse the devastation of the forests in the Himalayan foothills. But there's a broader dimension to this. Trees absorb the carbon dioxide produced by industrialized countries, which, in excess, is causing climate change. In the interest of all of us, the Berkeley Reforestation Trust is making a significant contribution in the battle against global warming through planting trees in their hundreds of thousands.
Parvati